All right, so we learned how to play audio in the first section. Now we're moving on to recording with the microphone. So what's great about iOS devices is they all have microphones on them, and so you can capture audio with those devices, including iPod touches, which is great. With that, what we're going to be covering is first setting up the microphone for recording. This is going to be really the big heart and meaty part of this section because there's a lot that goes into this. It's really not as simple as we saw last time with playing the audio. There's a lot of different things that you can tweak, and Apple requires you to set up. And then after that, we're going to cover, the basics of, well, how do you actually start hitting the record and, stopping that, saving it, whatever. Those are a lot simpler. That's going to be a different part here. Again, the big thing that we're covering in this section is getting that microphone set up for recording, and then we'll move into kind of the easier stuff of getting it rolling. So to kick things off first, setting up the microphone. As I said, this is a big task. You can kind of break it down to two separate parts. The first one is creating the audio session, getting that all ready to rock and roll. And you're saying, I don't even know what an audio session is at this point. But don't worry, I'll go ahead and walk you through all of that. The next thing is the audio recorder. So that's, a tool from AV Foundation that gets access from the session. You'll see how the two are connected there, but just know you have to get a session and a recorder ready before you can record anything. So let's go ahead and dive in now. As mentioned previously, there's essentially two steps that we've got to take here to get our recording all set up. And step one is to create an audio session. So what I'm going to do here is I don't want to delete this audio player code, but I'm not really looking to interact with it right now. So I'm actually going to move the audio player code to a separate function. So I'm going to make a new function called player setup. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and move all the code that we have for that into that function. And if we ever need to, we can call this player setup from our view did load. So I'll just go ahead and comment that out for now. But it's time to learn about audio sessions, and we need audio sessions in order to do recording. And this again comes from AV Foundation, so it's good that we've already got that implemented there. But here's what we've got to do to get a session set up. So first we want to create a session object. So we're going to say let session be equal to, and here type out AV audio session dot shared instance. So it's kind of a choice up to you about how you're going to use this session, whether you actually turn it into an object. Because it's using a shared instance, that shared instance is a singleton, meaning that you can get to it at any point in your code by just referencing AV audio session dot shared instance. So it's really kind of up to you about how you want to handle that. I always like to have it on hand just in case I'm going to be using it, but you just say let session be equal to that, right? That's how you start it. Then what we want to do is there's three basic things that we've got to do. We got to set the category, where we want this to happen, and also make it active. So we're going to take our session, and then on this we are going to set the category. So dot set category. Inside of here it's looking for a string, and you might be saying, oh, I don't know what categories I'm looking for here. But if you start typing out AV audio session and then you want category, you can see all the different options that we have here. So for us, we could just go ahead with just simply the category record. We're also going to be playing back audio at some point, so we actually want to choose this play and record. And as you can see, there's so many different other options that you have here, and all have their own purposes, and you can read more into that if you'd like. But for now, just go ahead and choose AV audio session category play and record. Wow, is that a mouthful or what? Now when you do this, this has to be surrounded with catch and the try, and so to kind of simplify this, we're just going to put a try question mark in front of this. And so we're basically saying, hey, if this doesn't work, just go ahead and set that equal to nil. And I know you can't really see what that looks like. Maybe I'll give us some more space so you can see the full line there. So that's setting the category. The next thing that we want to do, everything with this session is going to require a try, so we might as well just put that there. We're then going to say session dot, and then we want to do override audio output port. So go ahead and do that. And to see what options you have, just put a dot here, and it's either none or speaker. So the basic idea here is that if we're going to be, playing back audio, that we should have it done over the speaker. And so you can decide whether or not you want to do this. And for us, this isn't even going to be going into recording, but this is kind of just good to get in the habit of doing. So we'll go ahead and put that there. Then lastly, let's do our try question mark. We're going to take our session and then we are going to set it to active. So we're going to do .set active and pass true into there. So that will go ahead and kick everything off. So that's getting the session set up. And honestly, getting the session set up really not that big of a deal. But the next thing that we need to do is we need to get the recording all set up. So for recording with our AV Foundation, we are going to be using an object called the AV Audio Recorder. There's the AV Audio Player to play the sound, and then to record sound, we use the recorder. So I'm just going to make a new variable here, and I'm going to just call it Audio Recorder, just like its little bud above it. And we're going to say this is going to be an AV Audio, and then we want Recorder. And again, let's make this an optional so we can do our setup here inside of the view did load. So ultimately, we want to get to the point where we can create this audio player, and the line of code is going to look something like this, where we're going to say AV Audio Recorder with the opening parentheses, and we're going to pass forward a URL and then also some settings. The problem is we don't have a URL and we don't have settings. Now the URL is basically saying if I'm going to record something, I have to save it somewhere. So it's basically asking, where would you like to save your audio? And the next thing is the settings is, what sort of things do you want going into this recording? Like how, high def of a recording do you want? And you'll see the different options we have there. It's like what type of audio file is that you're trying to record. And so just keep in mind, this is ultimately the goal, is to set up an AV audio recorder here. It needs a URL and settings. So I'm going to comment that out so we don't see a gajillion errors, but just know that that's the goal. So for us, the first thing that we want to set up is we want to get a URL, a place that we can save this audio file. And so I'm going to recommend using the documents directory for your app. Every app that goes on someone's phone, it has sort of its own little sandbox where it can live and can save files and things like that. So, apps can't reach across and touch other apps that are on the device, but they can have their own, folders and directories. And so in order to create one of those, we're going to do an NS search path for directories in domain. I know this is a long one, so I'm going to have it all listed out here. NS search path for directories in domains. Make sure you use that autocomplete. So the first one is this asking, what directory do you want to save this in? And we should save it in our document. So if you do a dot, you can choose all the different options that show up here, but we want to go ahead and do the document directory, and make sure you don't have something else like the documentation directory. We want document directory. Okay, so we'll go ahead and choose that one. The next thing that we want is the domain mask, and so just go ahead and do a dot on here, and we just want to say start typing user, there it is, user domain mask. That's what we're looking for. And then the last, we want the expandable tilde. We're going to go ahead and put a true on there, and I know I'm butchering the name on that, but that will help us get access to that root level directory. Now this actually, the search path for directories in domains, if you go ahead and look at the documentation for this, this just gives us back an array of strings because it's doing a search. So we just want whatever the first object is back, so we're just going to go ahead and do a dot first there. And then we should go ahead and save this into some sort of string. And so with this, let's go ahead and put it inside of something like we could just say let base path equal to this whole thing here. And now if we want to access the base path, you can see that it's a string. Now the problem here is that it's a string optional. So to fix that, we should go ahead and do a little if let here, do a little curly bracket like that. So now if we try and access the base path, you can see we get a solid string. Okay. So if it's able to find this documents directory, the next thing that we want to do is determine what name we want to give to this audio file. And basically what we've got to do is just combine existing path that we have with the name of our audio file and put that in an array. So I'm just going to call this let paths, that might be a good way to describe this, be equal to, we'll just do a simple little array here. So the first one's going to be our base path, which is just a string. And then we need another string here. And in this case, it's just what do you want to name this file? And to keep this unique so that we can, try and find it and look for it later. I'm just going to call it something sort of ridiculous like I love audio iOS dot, and then you have to choose what file extension that you want. So I'm going to be going for the M4A. You'll notice that this is the exact same format that we have for our file that we brought in here. This works really well with Apple. You might want to choose MP3 if you're going to be using this audio file other places, but I'll go ahead and choose that. So we now have this path, which basically gets us to the directory, the documents directory in our app, and then it says, this is the name that I'm saving this as. The next thing that we need to do is combine these two things together and create a URL. So we're going to do ns URL here, dot file URL, here we go, with path components. So inside of here, I'm going to pass an array of strings, which is just this paths, right? It's basically just merging these two together and creating this ns URL. So I'm going to say paths right there. And then what this is going to do is it's going to have the audio URL that we're going to be using. So I might just say let audio URL be equal to this. And again, if we look at this audio URL file, it's an optional. We want to make sure that it's actually not nil. So let's do another if let unwrap so that we can be sure that this audio URL contains the location that we want to save this recording. And man, you're looking at this and you're going, yeah, playing the audio. What was this, like, 4 lines of code? This was a lot simpler than getting the recording stuff set up, but that's all right. We're going to move through this, okay? So once we have this audio URL, the next thing that we want to do is, and in fact, if we come back here to this AV audio recorder, I'm going to put this in the correct spot so we can see. Let's uncomment this. We now have the URL object for this, so we can go ahead and pass in audio URL just like that. It's really just these settings now that we've got to get in place. So I'm going to comment that back out till we get the settings. But the settings is basically just an array or a dictionary of strings as the keys and any for the values. So let's go ahead and make a new settings dictionary. And we're going to say a settings is of that type. So we'll say string as the key and then any as the value. Great, and initially we'll just set that equal to an empty dictionary. All right, now let's go ahead and add some things in there. So we're going to say, for example, settings, and we'll pass in the key of AV format ID key. And so this is asking what type of file do you want to save this as? So we want to save it as an M4A, so that extension will be correct. And so we're going to set this equal to, we want to do K audio format, and you can see all the popular options here, right? So we've got, like, as I say that, I'm noticing I don't really recognize the ones at the top there, but if you keep going down through, there's like the MP3 that's fully listed out here, but we've got other options. The one that we are looking for is the K audio format, and we want MPEG4 AAC. That's the one that we're looking for, okay? So the way that this is set up, we actually want this to be converted into an int before we do this. So we're going to do an int with parentheses, and that will go ahead and convert this. Because without this, you'll notice that we have the AAC that comes back as this audio format ID, and the documentation has changed for the settings that this has to be converted into an int. So we'll go ahead and do that. The next step for us is we want to set the sample rate. So this is saying how quality of a recording are you looking for. So to change this, we're going to say settings. Inside of the key, we're going to do AV sample rate key. Okay, and we're going to set this equal to, and this is just my choosing. You can do a different one if you like. I'm going to say 44,100.0. Now to keep this, if you want to be able to track your numbers better, you can put an underscore here that sort of acts as a comma, so you can see this is like 44,100. Can help sometimes to sort of understand what you're setting there. And then lastly, we're going to take our settings and we are going to set the number of channels. So we're going to do AV number of channels key, and we'll just go ahead and set that equal to 2. So with this in place, we are finally ready to say, all right, AV audio recorder, we went and got you this audio URL where we want to save the recording. Now we have some settings that we can provide you, and this will actually create an audio recorder. So we now want to take this audio recorder that's created and place it into our audio recorder that we have as a property. So I'm going to say, let's do a space here so I get my autocomplete. Audio recorder is equal to this, but this has to be used with a try. So we're going to do our try question mark. And if this works out and it's all good to go, then we want to get a prepare to record. And that's what helps us sort of integrate all these settings that we just got ready. So we're just going to, again, you can do an if-let here, just, kind of testing things out. Let's just use an optional. So audio recording optional dot prepare to record. And this is where we're ending in this video. Now, I know it's a little bit frustrating. It's like, we just did all this setup work. We still don't have an audio recorder that we can go and test around with, but we have all the preparation for this thing to be ready